What do Donald Trump, or more specifically the Trump indictment, the rule of law, more specifically equal justice, and an assault rifle ban, what do those three things have in common? Why are we talking about those three things on the Defiant Lawyers? Well, anytime we mention or analyze anything, it has to do with empowering the African American community. So we're going to show you how those three things are in connection. They are connected. They're in conjunction, and they involve us as African Americans. So hang around and we'll get right into it. All right. Thank you for hanging out with us. I am Attorney Augustus Corbett, aka the Minister of Justice, and with me I have the pleasure of having
Chloe Corbett, aka the Duchess of Justice.
And together we are the Defiant Lawyers. Each and every Saturday we bring you legal analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture to empower you with information you need to defy an unjust legal system. If you're not a subscriber, Chloe, what should they do?
Click that subscribe button. It's free. It's painless. Go ahead and click it right now. We appreciate it.
All right. In addition to that, like, comment, share, just engage. Help us grow this exciting channel. So, yes, we got a busy show for you today. And all that everybody is talking about is the Trump indictment. We have discussed it twice on this show, not the actual indictment, but the possibility that an indictment was coming. And yes, it seems like it is here. It is being widely reported. Although we haven't seen an indictment yet, Chloe, it's being widely reported that Trump has been indicted. In other words, a New York grand jury in the New York Supreme Court has voted to indict Trump, and reportedly there are some 30 different counts. Doesn't necessarily mean 30 different charges, but 30 different counts is what's being reported by major outlets. So, wow. I've been saying wow the whole time, and double, triple, quadruple wow on this. This is major for our country. What do you say about it, Chloe?
And it all has to do with Trump allegedly sending hush money to porn star Stormy Daniels days before the 2016 election. So this has been percolating for the past 7 years. 2016. There's been a lot of talk about potential criminal charges coming. It seemed like they were not going to come just a couple years ago, just a year or so ago, when new DA Alvin Bragg took office. It seemed like an indictment was not going to come. He did say, "Look, we're playing our cards closely." He told the media, "Unless you all are great poker players, you don't know what my office is doing." But reportedly, this indictment has come. So, Dad, this is extraordinary. One, because Trump is a former president of the United States, and this is the first time that a former president or sitting president has been indicted on a criminal charge. That is big.
Yeah, it's really big. It's really big for our nation. And in other words, this is uncharted waters. We've never been down this road before. So we got to navigate ourselves down this road, and everything's going to be okay. At the end of the day, I believe everything's going to be okay. We don't need to be alarmed about it, but it is really big. Unprecedented comes to mind. So we have asked you in the past to keep DA Bragg and his family in your prayers. because we knew what Trump and the MAGA crowd would do, and they are absolutely doing it.
They are. I've read reports that DA Bragg and his wife, they've been targeted. I read reports that his wife, went private on all of her social media. We know the statements that Trump has issued, as well as Fox News. I mean, Trump through Fox News and other right wing outlets, they have hundreds of people. They have a microphone of hundreds of people speaking out against the DA and speaking out about these proceedings. So, man, to be in the Bragg household today, I don't know how I would feel.
Yeah, I mean it's really big, and they've had death threats. Trump was seen in a photo with a bat, standing over DA Bragg's head. He's called him an animal. He's called him a psychopath. I mean, all kinds of horrible names. And, so we knew it was coming. They even received, the Manhattan DA's office even received a white powder, a letter, a death threat letter with a white powder in it. Turns out it wasn't nothing. But we knew it was coming. I'm sure DA Alvin Bragg knew it was coming. His family knew it was coming. So it took a lot of courage, a lot of guts to do this. And we're going to pray that he and everyone, the country gets through it.
Yeah, I was just in Manhattan. Was it February? And I went to the Manhattan courthouse, visited the criminal courthouse as well as the federal Thurgood Marshall courthouse. So I can only imagine the security that is at that courthouse now. I read reports that the Secret Service has done a sweep, excuse me, of the Manhattan jail because it's anticipated that Trump is going to turn himself in sometime next week. So I'm sure that there's a lot going on in Manhattan right now in the legal court system.
Yeah, as we've said in the past couple of shows, what typically would happen now is Trump would either turn himself in or would be arrested. I don't think they're going to arrest a former president. Then he will get fingerprinted. I believe that will happen, and a mugshot. I don't know if that will happen. That typically is what would happen, and then he would be arraigned. He would be told what the charges are against him. A bond would be set, and he would be released. That's typically what happens. But the idea that this is going to happen to a former president is really seriously mind blowing. Which brings me to the second topic that we're going to discuss, and that is the rule of law. It's said that this is a law of a nation of laws, not of men, meaning no one is above the law. But is that really true? Is that really true? Was that what DA Bragg was thinking? That if I'm going to prosecute the alleged drug dealer from Harlem, from Brooklyn, from Manhattan, if I'm going to prosecute that person, can I justify that prosecution without also prosecuting a very wealthy, rich former president? I think that's where he is with this, and that's really important to us as criminal defense lawyers. We represent people, the little guys, the poor people, the middle class people, black, Asian, Hispanic, white, all the time. So we're gonna say a thing or two about the rule of law.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. We do have that saying that we're a country of laws, but we know that men have come before laws in this country. If you look at the history of what has happened with the black community, and the aftermath of slavery and etc., I think is a pretty saying. I don't think it's true in all cases. And but apparently, in this case it may be. We'll see what happens. Just like any other defendant, Trump is presumed innocent, and that presumption goes through unless he is found guilty by a jury of his peers or he pleads guilty. So for right now, he's presumed innocent of any and all charges.
Very good. Thank you for saying that. As criminal defense attorneys, that is really, really important for us to remind people that the framers of the Constitution, not Augustus and Chloe Corbett, but the framers of the Constitution made sure that there was the presumption of innocence. And they did so because, remember, our country was founded by people who were escaping the tyranny of a monarchy. So they made sure that they would not create a monarchy here in America, but a limited government, federal government, and state government. And so I'm thankful that they included in the Constitution certain protections, for the individual. So that's why that presumption of innocence is really, really important. Chloe, I was having a conversation online with someone from Australia, and I don't know if this is true, but that person said their system is very different from ours in that a person starts out guilty and they have to prove that they're innocent.
Mhm.
And I said, first of all, that's scary. But second of all, ours is the very opposite. You start out innocent, and then the state has to meet the very high burden of proving a person's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So I'm grateful for that. And as criminal defense lawyers and civil rights lawyers and so forth, we insist, we constantly remind people, even the most unpopular person, probably the presumption of innocence is more important when someone is really unpopular, someone like Trump.
It is, and we have to make sure we continue to bring that out because oftentimes as black people, we are presumed guilty, like what the person you were speaking with, they say happens in Australia. So if it doesn't apply to Trump, then obviously it's not going to apply to us. The presumption of innocence and other protections that the Constitution has given us. So we make sure we say it each and every time because we know that we represent black and brown people and we need these protections and these presumptions more than any other group of people. So that's why I always want to make sure, no matter who it is, whether it's the rich and famous and powerful, like Donald Trump, or if it's little Ray Ray, from South Dallas, the presumption of innocence still stands and the burden is on the government. The burden is on New York County DA to prove these charges against Trump.
Yeah. Yeah, you said New York County. I believe it's Manhattan County, I think.
I think New York County is the county for Manhattan. I looked it up before we went up here because I,
Oh,
I
well,
wanted to make
excuse
sure I was
me.
right.
Well, excuse me. Excuse me. Pardon me, madam.
Because our
Whatever.
rebels, they own it. They'll check us if they feel we're not accurate. So
Very good. So, okay. All right. So it's New York County. All right. Very good then. Um, so we got some slides made that we just want to go through a little bit. May not get through all of them, but so this slide here, we're going to start with some of the things that were written in the New York Times. So the New York Times wrote yesterday, March 31st, 2023. 1 year ago this week, the Manhattan District Attorney's investigation into Donald J. Trump appeared to be dead in the water. The two leaders of the investigation had recently resigned after the new district attorney, Alvin Bragg, decided not to charge Mr. Trump at that point. Amid a fierce backlash to his decision in a brutal start to his tenure, Mr. Bragg insisted that the investigation was not over, but a disbelieving media questioned why, if the effort was still moving forward, there were so few signs of it. Quote, "Unless y'all are great poker players," Mr. Bragg told the New York Times in an early April 2022 interview, you don't know what you're doing. What they were doing, that is the DA's office, the new interviews show, was going back to square one and poring over the reams of evidence that had already been collected by his predecessor. For a time, their efforts were haphazard as they examined a wide range of Mr. Trump's business practices, including whether he had lied about his net worth, which was the focus of the investigation when Mr. Bragg had declined to seek an indictment. But by July, Mr. Bragg had decided to assign several additional prosecutors to pursue one particular strand that struck him as promising: a hush money payment made on Mr. Trump's behalf to a porn star during the final days of the 2016 presidential campaign. On Thursday, Mr. Trump was indicted on that strand. He is expected to surrender to the authorities in Manhattan on Tuesday and face arraignment on more than 24 charges, which will be unveiled at that time. That is important that we understand, Chloe, because the Republican Party, and I think you got something that you want to read from the House, the GOP House. They have alleged that Mr. Bragg is basically engaging in political persecution of Trump and is trying to put his finger on the 2024 presidential election, that he is some wild-eyed Democrat ideologue who is trying to use the Manhattan DA's office to affect, the 2024 election and to persecute one of the Democrat rivals. I think this report here, this article from the New York Times, shows just the very opposite. This man took his time, despite all kinds of pressure from within his office and from outside, and definitely from other Democrats, to go after Trump and hold him accountable and prosecute him like you would everyone else. But obviously, DA Bragg knew that he had to dot his T's, dot his I's, cross his T's, because you don't shoot at the king unless you can hit him. So I think the way he just took his time, added more prosecutors, started over from square one, shows that this is not an overzealous Democrat ideologue like they are accusing him of being.
Yeah, he did what you taught me, that I think is an old Navy slogan, which is to measure twice, cut once. That
That's
sticks
right.
out to me with every single thing that I do, especially professionally. And he took his time, just like what the New York Times alleged, under immense pressure, just like you said. And the Republicans, they have used this as a um, campaign slogan, to campaign and get more money and fuel up their base. But I did want to read a letter that Alvin Bragg's office, via their general counsel, wrote to specifically three congressmen, Republican congressmen: Jim Jordan, Brian Steele, and James Comer. These are all very powerful House Republicans on various committees, and I'm going to read it in part. So, on behalf of Alvin Bragg's office, it says, yesterday, the district attorney of New York County filed charges against Donald Trump for violations of New York law. The charges filed yesterday were brought by citizens of New York doing their civic duty as members of a grand jury who found probable cause to accuse Mr. Trump of having committed crimes in New York. Like any other defendant, Mr. Trump is entitled to challenge these charges in court and avail himself to all processes and protections that New York State's robust criminal procedure affords. What neither Mr. Trump nor Congress may do is interfere with the ordinary course of proceedings in New York State. Your first letter made an unprecedented request to the district attorney for confidential information about the status of the state grand jury investigation, now indictment, of Mr. Trump. So I want to stop there, Dad, because the first two paragraphs of this letter brings up very important um, legal legal theories and that are important in the law. One, and not legal theories, but legal procedure. One, the charges were brought by citizens of New York via a grand jury. So there were 12 in Texas, it would have been 12 people who were sitting in those grand jury proceedings, who listened to the witnesses, looked at all of the evidence, and decided that there was probable cause to indict Trump on various counts of alleged crimes committed in New York. So, this was not just Mr. Bragg's office. This was not just the DA. These were regular New York citizens who listened to this, the grand jury, and decided to indict him. And if you look at the history of the grand jury, it goes back, hundreds of years, back to the English legal system, which was a barrier between the government and people, those accused of crimes. That is the purpose of the grand jury. They are an independent investigatory body who listens and reviews and looks at evidence and decide whether or not to um, indict a person. And that is what happened with Mr. Donald Trump. Another thing that stood out to me in the first part of this letter, Dad, is where they said that Trump nor Congress may interfere with the ordinary course of proceedings in New York State. Now, look, we know a lot of conservatives, a lot of Republicans. They argue about states' rights, states' rights, state rights, state rights. Let's limit the federal government until it doesn't benefit them. So if it's a gun issue, which we're going to talk about later, or some other type of social issue, oh, let the states decide. The states' rights, etc. But just like this letter points out, it seemingly, they requested confidential information about these proceedings, and this letter alleges that they were trying to interfere with what New York was doing. So that contrast between Republicans arguing for state rights and then allegedly trying to interfere with what happened with this grand jury proceeding stuck out to me. What are your thoughts?
No, with me as well. Um, yeah, the federal government is very powerful. Typically, what it does trumps state law. But there is something that was added to the Constitution called the 10th Amendment. And it says essentially the rights that are not reserved are not enumerated to the federal government are reserved to the states. And you're right. Now, most of the time, you're not going to hear a states' right argument from me because states' rights arguments have been used traditionally against African Americans, most famously or most infamously during slavery or to defend slavery. The enslaver said the federal government can't come down here and tell us what to do in our states. If in our states we want to uh, have an institution of chattel slavery, then we can do so. But when and even during the civil rights movement, right, when things were popping off and we were having to fight for the right to vote and etc. Again, they made a states' rights argument. But now, all of a sudden, forget states' rights. They got to jump out here and try to protect their guy, Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is still widely popular with the GOP base. So, yeah, it's very, like Chris Rock said, selective outrage here.
Hmm. Literally, I mean that's the perfect phrasing for it. And so with the selective outrage, that I did see, it's been reported that since the news of this supposed indictment came out, that Trump has raised over $4 million. I mean, that's a lot of money. And I'm sure that this is opening his coffers up, for his presidential campaign. And when he announced it a couple weeks ago, I'm sure that that was one of the goals as well. Try to raise as much money as possible by getting his base infuriated. So, hey, it's even though he's facing criminal charges, it is coming to his advantage as well.
Absolutely. I want to read one other thing from the New York Times that sort of connected to this second paragraph. Along the way, a key internal skeptic of the investigation became one of its champions. Mr. Bragg shook up the Trump team and hired an experienced lawyer away from the Justice Department to help lead it, and he ultimately found new promise in a key witness he had once disregarded as unreliable. The district attorney was also emboldened late last year when his prosecutors won a conviction of Mr. Trump's company in an unrelated tax case. Now, this case, as I see it, Chloe, has its challenges, okay, as all cases do. But if we take a criminal defense lawyer look at this case or this indictment, we haven't seen it yet. We have not seen it yet. We have not seen the indictment yet, so we don't know what's in it. Okay, it's sealed, hasn't been released yet. It will be. But it does have some challenges. And I thought of a few. Chloe, you may have some others, but off the top of my head, here are some of the challenges I see with this case, right? So first of all, DA Bragg is dealing with a former prosecutor, a former president of the United States. I mean, that alone creates serious challenges. It was this past Thursday, I think, or maybe Friday, that I read where the actress Gwyneth Paltrow, is that her name?
Yeah.
Was in a civil case. She had been accused of causing someone damage on a ski slope, and the jury came back with a verdict against the person who accused her. So that goes to show you that's just one of many cases involving celebrities and powerful people. That goes to show you it is hard to get a conviction of these folks. The probable cause standard to get the indictment is much lower than the reasonable doubt standard that will be required for a regular jury to find Mr. Trump guilty. And I mean, if it's hard to win a case against an actress, can you imagine a former president? So I see that, Chloe, is the first hurdle here.
Yeah, in addition to that, him being a former president, because he is so well known, I wonder if his legal team is going to say it would be impossible for him to get a fair trial. This is out of New York. Even though he's originally from New York, a lot of his businesses are in New York. But if he's not able, if this goes to trial and they're not able to find impartial jurors, then they may make an argument that this is and the venue needs to be changed, or he would not be able to get a fair trial. So I'm curious to see if they take that direction with this case, if it goes beyond indictment. And that we know, just because someone is indicted does not mean that is going to go to trial. Oftentimes the case not oftentimes, but sometimes the case gets dismissed after indictment. The person takes a plea deal. So we'll see if this goes all the way to trial. But yeah, that's big. I mean, he's just so well known. I mean, even if people don't like him, some people will say, "Well, we can't convict the former president."
I think that's one of the challenges, and also with the venue argument, I think the fact that he's so well known almost defeats the purpose of moving the trial, because he's going to be just as well known in some other county. I mean, where can he go and not be well known in this country?
True.
And also, Manhattan is his home turf, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, he owns a penthouse and property over throughout the city. So, I mean, I think he left and moved his residence to Florida, but this is where New York, Manhattan, that area, Queens, I think, is his hometown, and a lot of business deals and so forth. So he has a lot of connections in New York. So I don't know if the venue argument is going to work, but yeah, you're right. It's a major issue.
Yep.
Former president, another um, challenge, I believe, is the fact that there is an upcoming presidential election, and many naysayers are going to say that DA Bragg is using this indictment, this prosecution, to put his finger on the presidential election. So I see that as being an issue too. What say you, Chloe?
It could be an issue because it could go to kind of the accusations what we were talking about earlier. Why wait until now? Now we read the New York Times article that explained that he wanted to investigate more and he wasn't satisfied with the investigation a year ago. But why wait until 2023 when the presidential election is gearing up and will be in 2024? So that's a fair question. I think it should be asked. At the end of the day, DA Bragg is an elected official, and he was elected to represent the residents and citizens of New York County. So I think it should be something that his office should answer for. Why wait until now? And it definitely
Yeah,
would be an argument that we would make if we were on Trump's defense team.
absolutely. So that's kind of the reason we're analyzing this way, because we have on our criminal defense lawyer hat here now. And so, no matter the unpopularity of the defendant, we have a job um, to defend him zealously if we were part of the team. And that's something that people don't realize about criminal defense attorneys. We represent unpopular people all the time. I
Mhm.
mean, people that the community has just turned against and just want done away with. They want punishment, sometimes death. Yet we're the people who are standing shoulder to shoulder with them in the courtroom and throughout the process. Another possible issue, Chloe, is the fact that Bragg's a Democrat. And that sort of ties into what we've already been talking about. So we've sort of commented on that one. But this other one here is a real challenge to me, and that is Michael Cohen is, I believe, a key witness, and he has all kinds of credibility issues. And the Trump team are going to pounce on Cohen should he take the stand.
Ooh, they're gonna have a field day with him. Um, I mean, just man, what a I don't know if is discredible a word?
Discredited,
Maybe yeah, maybe yeah. What a discredited witness Cohen could be. And I don't know.
but you ask is discreditable. I believe
Is
it is.
discredible a word? Is it?
I believe it is. I mean, if
Okay.
not, you just invented one. I mean, you're a
I just
lawyer.
said
You can
let's
invent
add it
one.
into Merriam Webster's dictionary. What a discreditable witness that is. But yeah, no, I mean, Trump's defense team, I mean, they'll have a field day cross-examining Cohen, you know, bias, conflicts of interest, all types of things that they're going to go into if he were to testify against Trump at trial.
All right, another issue, and this is one here. All of these are legitimate issues. Here's another one here that I think we just got to wait to see what the indictment says. But hush money commonality. I mean, Chloe, we write these things up all the time. You call them hush money. Um, that's what the media's calling them. What we call these are confidentiality agreements, non-disclosure agreements, um, release. You know, almost every civil case that is settled has one of those. You offer the other side, or the other side offer you money, and you agree to drop your lawsuit and stay quiet about it. So we got to see more. I think it has, Trump's lawyer, Joe Pacasino, I think his name is, or Taca, what is it, Tacopino?
Something with a T, I think.
Yes, Tacopino. I'm sorry
Yeah.
for messing up Mr. Tacopino's name. But he's saying that since the money was not exclusively used for Trump's election, because Trump allegedly paid this. Now, he denies it. He even denies having any kind of relationship with Stormy Daniels. But Michael Cohen and maybe some other witnesses will try to establish that no, the payments were made, they came from Trump. But Trump's lawyer, Joe Tacopino, has said that so long as the money was not related to Trump's election, they were legal.
And in
So we got,
regards to that point, you said that I think it was great about the commonality of quote unquote hush money. And I mean, non-disclosure agreements are perfectly legal in most cases. You know, confidentially clauses are illegal as well. And for people that don't know what frozen, am I frozen? Can y'all hear me? Okay,
yeah, you,
I froze a
yeah,
little
you
bit.
were frozen. Yeah,
Okay, but Stormy
you're back.
Daniels, former porn star, says that she had an affair with Trump in 2006. In 2016, when he was running for president, she was trying to sell her account of what happened to the media. Allegedly, Mr. Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, who we mentioned before, allegedly, and this is all just allegations, paid her $130,000 to keep quiet. And that is the so called hush money. Okay. Now, what people are speculating the indictment may be on is the fact that Mr. Cohen's reimbursement, the way that it was recorded in Cohen's accounts, who and Cohen was accused of falsifying his business records by saying that the payment was for legal fees and not for the so-called hush money. So that's
And
kind of
pled
where
guilty.
some of the
I mean, he pled guilty and did
yeah,
time for the same
yeah,
thing that Trump is now accused of.
true. Yeah. So he's convicted of that. So I mean, but I think it goes to your point, the challenges with the state's case that you know, NDAs and paying someone to keep quiet is not necessarily illegal, but it's the way that the payment was recorded, either as legal fees or etc. I think that's where a lot of the criminality may come in as well.
Yeah, yeah. That now, why is my camera turning off? Wow,
Come on now, technology.
what in the world?
Yeah, I don't know what happened to your camera, Dad.
Chloe, I'm putting it on you to try to
Okay.
figure out what in the world is going on with my camera.
So, I mean, just the fact that it's such a good question about okay, non-disclosure agreements and settlement negotiations, something that we as attorneys do every single day. You know, when an aggrieved party or an injured party sues a defendant, most times the case does not go to trial. Most times the parties come to a settlement, it's settled out of court, and that is it. So we don't know, you know, what was in the NDAs, if there were any between Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump. We don't know if there was any confidentiality clauses, but if there were some, it's not necessarily illegal by itself to even settle a case before litigation is filed. We've done that too. So perhaps Trump and his team could have told Stormy Daniels, hey, if you don't stop this, if they could have sent a cease and desist. This is speculation. I don't know if it happened, but they could have told Stormy and her team, if you don't stop trying to sell, you know, this lie that we had a relationship to the media, we're going to sue you. And instead of actually suing her, they could have come to some type of pre-litigation settlement, which could be the quote unquote hush money. So, you know, there's a lot of details and digging that would need to be done for the state to be able to meet its burden now to prove that Trump committed whatever counts are in the indictment beyond a reasonable doubt. Because keep in mind, guys, the standard of probable cause is low, and people get indicted every single day in the criminal justice system. And all an indictment is a piece of paper that names out the formal charges that a person is facing. But the question is, once that indictment happens, can the state meet its burden to prove every element of every count in its indictment beyond a reasonable doubt? And that is a high standard. It is extremely high. It is something that is so important that when we try cases before juries as criminal defense attorneys, we take a significant amount of time to educate the potential jurors on the differences in standard and on how high the burden is on the government to bring evidence to prove our client is guilty. And there you go. You're back.
Yeah, but I don't know how long I'm gonna be back. Unfortunately, I don't know what's going on with this camera, so it's subject to go out again.
We'll make it work.
But you did a good time. You did a good job. Just just giving that law school class there. Um, yeah.
A
So
very
the
short
the other
primer in criminal procedure.
yes, it was good too. The other issue is, pardon me, the other issue, Chloe, is Trump's victimhood claims. I mean, he, as you indicated earlier, they're already raising money. Out here saying he's the biggest victim since, you know, everyone in human history since Noah's Ark has not been um, a bigger victim than Trump. So they intend to use this by all means. They're going to use this. What they would like is for, quite frankly, they would like for D.A. Bragg to have him locked up, have him handcuffed on TV. Uh, he Trump and his folks would like for armed officers to show up at his mansion so that he can just manipulate and show everyone of a victim he is. That's his MO.
So I think
Yeah,
my
that's
dad
his
cut
M.
out.
No, you can't see me.
No, I see myself now, but you cut out a little bit. But what I heard you say, Dad, is that what Trump would like is to for the world to see him in handcuffs, being taken to jail. Think you were going down that vein, right?
Yeah, I mean, you didn't hear that dropped out.
That dropped out.
So the audio went out too.
Yeah, a portion of it.
Wow, I have no idea what's happening. Some of the best equipment made shouldn't be doing this. I'll get to the bottom of it. But go ahead.
So I mean, yeah, I agree. I mean, Trump and his team, they're gonna use this to his advantage as much as possible to help fire up his base, to help raise money and all of that. With Trump is all about the money. It's all about the dineros. And he's been evading criminal charges for 3 decades. So I mean, and using and somehow just kind of slitting his way around and became the president. So in that regard, they're going to try to use this as much to their advantage as possible.
So now let's move into the rule of law, and that is, this issue of equal justice. I think D.A. Bragg, being an African American from Harlem himself, I think it weighed heavily on him, Chloe, that he knew he has a responsibility if he's going to prosecute, black and brown people from the ghetto, he's going to have to prosecute folks if there's evidence to show that a crime was committed, folks from Fifth Avenue, folks from the Hamptons, uh, I don't know if his jurisdiction extends to the Hamptons. I doubt that, but the rich and powerful in New York County. So, and you and I, this is important to us because we are fighting out here for these poor people, these people of color every day. And it's just disheartening to see the rich and powerful. And it happens. It happens. We know sometimes if our client was rich and powerful or white, this would be going in a different direction. And we have to call the prosecutor out on that so often, right?
Yeah, we do. I mean, in almost every case, it feels like we have to call the state out, the ADAs out, and why is it so important for the rule of law to apply to everyone the same? Whether you're wealthy, whether you are impoverished, because the state has almost, and it feels like as defense attorneys, immeasurable resources that to prosecute people and to bring charges against people and investigators and officers and a whole staff and assistants. And sometimes it feels like David going against Goliath, going against the state and its resources when you're representing an impoverished person accused of a crime. And we're trying to put on the best, fiercest, most aggressive defense possible, but don't have the resources to match the state. That's where we see it every day in practical law. And I don't know if DA Bragg was ever a defense attorney, but I'm sure being from Harlem, he's probably seen the effects of an unjust system on, friends and people in the community that he grew up on a personal level. And maybe he took that into account once he became elected as DA out of Manhattan. I hope so. But I'm one that believe that ideally the laws, statutes should apply to everyone the same, whether you're a politician, whether you are a regular citizen, etc. It should apply the same. We know in theory, we know in practicality it doesn't, but it should.
Yeah, absolutely. But unfortunately, it doesn't quite a bit. Um, we have someone, one of the commenters, who's saying that YouTube is messing with the streaming. So
Mm,
apparently, there's something going on with our show on YouTube. Um, I hope it's not too bad, and I apologize, you all.
sorry about that.
Sis, yes, Sister Ave says here, this is a no-win situation. Lord have mercy. I agree with that. I agree with that. She goes on to say, this man is the biggest victim in history. Just a hot mess. Yes. He will definitely, just talk about all the ways that he's a victim, despite being a claimed billionaire with mansions everywhere. And I mean, has lived, the great life all his life, born into wealth with a silver spoon in his mouth, yet he's the biggest victim. And do keep in mind, I saw a statement that was made yesterday by one of the so-called Central Park Five, Chloe, Dr. Yusuf uh, Salam, I believe is his last name. And he was one of those young men, one of those, there were four black and one Hispanic men, young men, teenagers, that Trump called for the death penalty, spent money calling for the death penalty on these was called karma, what we Christians call someone reaping what they sowed. I just wanted to throw that in as well. But the rule of law, equal justice, it's really, really, really important. Oftentimes we don't see it. Oftentimes what we see are two different criminal justice systems. One that results in mass incarceration of African Americans because quite often, from racial profiling to these overzealous prosecutors to blacks being excluded from juries, All sorts of things are built into the criminal justice system to produce the results that we see. Um, so, yeah, the rule of law. No man should be above the law. Now, we'll
Nope.
move into, since I'm having camera issues and there may also be some audio issues, we'll move into our last topic, Chloe, the Nashville shooting, which is heartbreaking, quite frankly. I mean, just totally heartbreaking. I want to put on the screen the faces of the victims. There were 6 victims in this shooting. These precious 6 people here.
Mm.
Catherine Coates, Mike Hill, Cynthia Peak. Well, this I'm so sorry. This young child here, her name was not Catherine Coates. Um, Chloe, can you look that up? I want to give her a proper name. And then there's
Yes.
Evelyn Dykus, it looks like. And finally, William Kinney. So 3 adults and 3 children were killed by a reported trans man, I think. It was a woman who was transitioning to a man. And
Hallie
she
Scruggs
supposed,
is her name, Dad.
say it
Haley or
again.
Hallie? Haley Scruggs, I believe.
Okay. Well, it's so sad just looking in those tears, those children's eyes, and these 3 adults that they would die in such a horrible, brutal way like that. Bodies being riddled with bullets from an assault rifle. Um, Now, you all just heard me say that it's sad that they were killed by an assault rifle, reportedly. Um, but I don't, I do not support the assault rifle ban. And Chloe, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Yeah, because my camera went out again.
Yeah, you're
Camera went
coming
out again.
loud and clear.
Okay. So we're going to talk about the assault rifle ban as we have to kind of rush to a close now. Unfortunately, I don't know what's going on with my camera, but Chloe, go ahead and take it, and let me see if I can restore my camera.
Yeah, I mean, when I first heard about this tragic shooting, I mean, my heart dropped, and it's sad and it's tiring and it's infuriating that this continues to happen. These mass shootings, but not only mass shootings, but mass shootings at schools. We had one here just a few days ago, in the DFW area as well, where 2 young people were shot and killed at school. And then to hear about this one, this mass shooting, it's just absolutely heartbreaking. And to me, it again highlights, and I know that we have some disagreement about this, Dad, but something does need to be done to put protections in place to keep firearms out of the hands of people who do not need to have firearms. Period. Now look,
We don't disagree about that.
okay. So we agree on that part.
Definitely,
Okay.
absolutely. Keeping firearms out of the hands of people who are, dangerous, violent people. Absolutely, we completely agree. We agree completely on that.
Well, I guess what some of our differences of opinion come into the assault weapon ban. I think you
Yes,
are against it and I'm for it. Um
yes.
I think that there does
I,
need to be some type of ban with assault weapons in this country for most people. I don't feel like most people need semi-automatic rifles, pistols, shotguns, those type of assault weapons. And if a person does have it, I believe that there needs to be some type of extra checks and balances to be able to know who has possession of them, where the guns are. I was reading some statistics that there are more guns in this country than there are people. And I mean, and a lot of them are unaccounted for. Something needs to be done. Something. What are your thoughts?
Well, I just brought up our screen to kind of show where I'm coming from. Um, in 2020, according to the Pew Research Center, 45,222 people died by guns in this country. Um, what percentage of those people who died by guns were by suicide? 54% were suicide. What percentage of people who died by guns in 2020 were killed with pistols? 59%. Okay, the majority of them were either by suicide or pistols. So the next question, what percentage of people who died by guns in 2020 were killed with AR-15s? Only 3%. Only 3% of the people who died in 2020 from guns died from assault rifles. What percentage of people who died by guns in 2020 were in a mass shooting? 1.1%. So most of the people who died in the country died from handguns and by suicide. And most of those people who died by handguns, and a growing number of the suicides, are African American people. So the focus, in my mind, should be on keeping handguns, especially, out of the hands of violent people, dangerous people. The assault rifle ban, according to the Pew Research Center, this is not my evidence, this is them, account for, again, only 3% of those that were killed in 2020. So if we focus everything on the assault rifle ban, it's going to impact primarily 3% of the deaths of the 45,000 people. Now, every life is precious. Every one of those lives we just pointed out is precious. Every day, though, African Americans die by handguns. Every day there's a mass shooting, or you can consider the mass shooting from all the number of people who die by handguns in the Black community. No outrage about that, no reporting. It's not on the media. Nobody talks about it. And finally, I'll say this. Let me see if my camera's working. Finally, I will point out, I read in the Washington Post this past week that most of the people who own AR-15s are white, males, wealthy. They live in states that overwhelmingly vote for Trump. They are overwhelmingly Republican. So most of the people who own the AR-15s come from that demographic. I don't know about anybody else, but I don't want that demographic of people owning all the AR-15s, and I don't have one. That doesn't make sense to me, because that demographic, they're not giving up their AR-15s. It doesn't matter what Joe Biden does. It doesn't matter what Congress does. They are not giving up their AR-15s. They're not going to do it. They're not.
Yeah.
I believe they will go to war first. That's not going to happen. So I think it's incumbent upon African American people, law-abiding African American people, to have their own AR-15s. The last time we were disarmed, we were enslaved.
I mean, from that standpoint, as a black person in this country, I definitely believe that um, we need to make sure that we are armed and ready to defend ourselves. We've seen what has happened in this country when, just like you said, we've not been able to. And um, you know, someone growing up in a home with firearms, can shoot myself. I enjoy going to the firing range, all of that. I think is necessary that we're able to do that as black people. But I think that there also needs to come be a balance for that as well, so that when, our kids are going to school, there's some type of checks and balances so that we don't have these mass shootings in schools and other places. And that's why we elect our officials and legislators to get into Congress or get in, state capitals, put their heads together, do research, listen to experts to come up with solutions to make sure that our population and our children are protected. And, because of gun lobbyists and other lobbyists in this country, that hasn't happened. And so, every month or so, every few months, we have these mass shootings, these school shootings. People get outraged, people are sad, and nothing happens. So I think there needs to be a balance between us, the black community, protecting ourselves and making sure that we are armed, but also protecting our children as well, and other vulnerable people in our population too.
Well, your view is the popular view, no doubt about it. I think most people agree with an assault rifle ban. I just don't believe that that view is based on data. I believe it's based more on emotions. Um, and it's an emotional issue. I mean, when you see the precious faces of these people and they were slaughtered by someone wielding an AR-15, um, the worst being in the past few months has been the shooting at Uvalde, then the Buffalo shooting, this shooting, and many others. So I understand the emotions behind it, but it's not logical because again, AR-15s account for uh, a minimum amount of the deaths, although each death is precious. I don't want to be um, I want anybody to misunderstand me on that.
Well, I think
Sister
that.
A,
Oh,
go ahead.
I was gonna say. Then I think that.
Well, Chloe, let me just say this before you go. You got supporters here. Um, Sister Abe says, I don't understand why an everyday citizen need an assault weapon. I agree with you, Chloe. Um, Sister Carrie, agree with your daughter 100%. If a product like a playpen kills children, then it is recalled and not said again and sold again. It doesn't matter how many babies died. Um, and Sister Abe also pointed out that yes, the baby's name was Haley Scruggs, and her father is the pastor of the church.
Mm.
So, um, your mother chimed in. She says the data is the data. So I think the lawmakers should work together to minimize people who shouldn't possess guns from having them. When the mass shootings occur, they are so horrific because soft targets become victims. And it seems the AR-15 guns are used in many instances. What does the research say about what types of guns are used in mass shootings? So again, I think what you just heard reflects where most people are, and that is they support a an assault rifle ban. But when we look at the data, it's just not that view is just not based on the data. It's just not. 3% in 2020 were killed with AR-15s, whereas 59% of the people who were killed in 2020 were killed with pistols. So that should be the focus. That should be the focus. What say you,
But the
Chloe?
type of killing that too, I think is important as well. Or at least data should be collected on that. One, thank you for all the comments, Sister Ave, Sister, who was the other sister? Um,
Sister Lassiter,
Sister
Carrie
Lassiter,
Lassiter.
and obviously Mom, of course.
Yes.
Um, I think that what Mom pointed out too about the type of weapons that are used in the mass shootings are important. I mean, because a mass shooting is different than a domestic violence situation where a gun is used or self-defense. So the other shootings where the data you brought up, that we don't know what type of shootings they are. And I think most people understand that typically in everyday shootings is probably not going to be an assault weapon or semi-automatic or however it needs to be defined. But I do think that in terms of the context of the mass shootings, we need more data information about the type of guns that are used. And that is what most people are talking about when they're talking about the assault weapon ban in the context of mass shootings.
Well, still having camera issues, so I'm having to try to work around it. Let me once again say that the Washington Post reported just this past week, because of all the attention that's on the assault rifle, that most of the people who own assault rifles in this country are white, males, GOP, Trump voters, wealthy, etc. Now, let me just be blunt. Historically, that is the same crowd that has enslaved African Americans, created Jim Crow, and implemented and created many other policies to protect white supremacy and to undermine the progress of African Americans. I'm not willing to disarm when that crowd are armed to the teeth with AR-15s. I've had some white dudes to tell me they got 14 and 15 AR-15s, and yet, I'm being told to disarm. I'm not going to do it. I mean, I'm not going to do it. I'm my AR-15 and my other guns will sit static and never be used against someone illegally, unconstitutionally. And I would say most of the white guys, the white men, the rich men, the GOP, most of them won't use their guns against anyone illegally either. I'm not suggesting that. It is, as we said earlier, it is keeping whether it's a handgun or AR-15 out of the hands of the wrong people. Therefore I am for a universal background check, for example. I'm also for, let me bring up a couple other things. Closing certain loopholes, Chloe. For example, the Charleston loophole. And this is where someone who desires to purchase a firearm goes to the store to get one, but it takes more than 3 days for the background check to be completed. The store can go ahead and sell them that gun. not knowing whether they are a dangerous person or not. That loophole should be closed because it's the very same loophole that was used to give the Charleston shooter, the guy who shot up the church, killed those 9 people. That's how he was able to get his gun. His background check was not completed in 3 days, so they sold him the gun. Close this loophole. Also, the lax requirements of mental health reporting. This shooter in the Nashville case, Chloe, was reportedly receiving treatment for emotional disorders. Well, that was not reported to the FBI so that it could have been known by the FFL, the Federal Firearm Licensee, and it may have been used to stop the shooter from buying the gun legally. I mean, that's a loophole. Now, some of the mental health experts will make the argument, and I think it's a fair argument, that people with mental illness, most of them are nonviolent people, and they shouldn't necessarily be prohibited from having a firearm. It's the violent people. And in fact, the mental health advocates will say that a lot of the people who have mental illness are victims of violence. So should this shooters should it have been reported to the FBI that the shooter was receiving emotional treatment for emotional disorders that could have potentially stopped the shooter from getting a firearm? So that's something else. There are a couple of
Yeah,
others.
there's a lot of conflicting interests about that because, I do believe that most people who have emotional disorders or mental health diagnoses are not necessarily violent. And the data supports that as well. So you also want to protect the rights of a person who has a mental health or emotional health disorder, from being able to exercise their Second Amendment rights, with the duty of the government to protect its citizens and protect the population as well. So that's why I think there needs to be a lot more open hearings and testimony from Congress, to have mental health experts come in, gun experts, Second Amendment experts, to testify, where citizens can listen to those testimonies, and really come to some type of comprehensive plan to address all of the issues that we're talking about here now. Because there just doesn't seem to be any inaction. The politicians come out to make statements, and then we forget about it in a week.
Sure, I agree. So I'm putting up a list of things that I believe can be done without an assault rifles ban that will deal with most of the, gun deaths. A third one is red flag laws. So this is really important, and this could have been critical in this situation. If the parents knew that their child was having emotional issues and was receiving treatment, and knew that the person owned a gun, had a red flag law, they could have filed a motion with a judge and could have said, Judge, we don't think our child should have a firearm right now because, there's some mental illness going on, and we think she could be a danger to herself or to someone else. So red flag laws, and a lot of the red states, they fight red flag laws pretty strongly. Texas doesn't have red flag laws, but they can save lives. So I'm in agreement with red flag laws. And then last of all, straw purchases, where someone who can legally buy a gun will then turn around and sell it to someone who shouldn't have it. That should be dealt with more harshly, and that should be figured out as well. So I think if we deal with straw purchases, if we have more states with red flag laws, if we strengthen the requirements of reporting mental illness, and if we close such loopholes as the Charleston loophole, I think that'll go a lot further, given the data, at saving lives than thinking, kind of having some sort of false or fake comfort of saying, okay, we got an assault rifles ban, that's going to save lives. That's not true just based on the numbers.
I mean, I think we need to look into all of those, getting those loopholes closed, as well as the red flag laws via the states. But I think, again, that there needs to be even more updated data as well in regards to these quote unquote assault bans. And I think Congress needs to do that. Um, Maybe even the president needs to put a commission together to do a in-depth report about guns and firearms, assault bans, the loopholes, all of this. I remember back in was it the 60s, there was a commission report done about racism in this country. I forget the name of it now. The Warner, I can't remember the name of it now. But I think it needs to
The
be taken
Kerner,
as serious.
the
Yeah,
Kerner Commission.
yeah. I think something like that needs to be done in regards to firearms and mass shootings in this country as well, and get together different types of experts from these broad and diverse fields to try to put something together in place that would help prevent all of this as well, in addition to all of the loopholes that you said too.
Sister Ave, who is a mental health professional, says mental health disorders and emotional disorders can be a big issue. I worked in mental health more than 20 years. People who are delusional, hear voices, and are sociopaths should never, and I mean never, have access to weapons. I think we all agree on that. Absolutely. You know, that's not singling out mental illness generally, but those who have the severe mental illness, the delusions, and the sociopaths should never, ever have any kind of firearm, an AR-15, a pistol, or anything else.
What if they're under
So this,
medication and it's
to me, even if they're taking medication, they shouldn't have it, in my opinion.
yeah, I mean it's tough because we also know that black people, we tend to get diagnosed false diagnoses. So what if someone is falsely diagnosed with some type of disorder, but is some type of trauma, and that could prevent them from owning a firearm? I mean, these are all good questions that we'll be discussing in the future. Um, so yeah, thank you all for joining us today. We hope that this discussion has been fruitful, that you all have taken something away from today's show. We are here each and every Saturday. At least we try to be. We are the Defiant Lawyers. We appreciate all of you all. Thank you for commenting, subscribing, liking the video. We appreciate each and every single one of you all, that you have taken time out of your day to listen to us. That does not go unnoticed. With that, Dad, I think we good. Good.
We're good. Absolutely.
Peace. Take care.
Peace.
See you
Love.
next time.
We're out. Bye.
Ever since I was a child, I've always hated bullies. I was that child. If I saw another kid getting picked on in class or at the lockers, I would stand up for that kid. I couldn't stand seeing bullying. But there was one incident with a teacher that almost silenced me. It is my first clear memory of racism and discrimination. It's still so vivid and clear in my head. I remember one day we were in class one afternoon, and there was some school pep rally going on. My teacher decided to hand paint butterflies and flowers on our faces in anticipation of the school event. So we all went one by one up to her so that she could paint our face. When it was my turn to get my face painted, my teacher told me, "I can't paint your face because your skin is too dark." I was mortified, embarrassed, and deeply ashamed. In that moment, even though I wanted to say something, I couldn't get the words out. So I walked back to my desk, I sat down, and I stared blankly at my desk until the bell rang. When I got home from school that day, my parents knew something was wrong. But I remember being so reluctant to tell them. I really don't know why. When I finally did, obviously they were furious. And let's just say the next day at school was one to remember. But this incident taught me a valuable lesson. It taught me to always stand up against racism, discrimination, and injustice. It fortified my resolve to fight for the vulnerable and voiceless. Just like my clients' voices are taken when they are wrongfully accused of a crime, subjected to banking while black, fighting for custody of their children, or fighting for just compensation from stingy insurance companies. My name is Attorney Chloe Corbett, also known as the Duchess of Justice. I am one half of Corbett & Corbett Law Firm and the Defiant Lawyers. We're here to fight for justice for the accused, the oppressed, the vulnerable, and the voiceless. You can find us in Dallas, Texas. Go to our website, www.corbettfirm.com. Improving lives and impacting laws.